It's incredibly important to have an understanding of infectious diseases. The current generation has grown up in an age where infectious diseases happen and they're very serious, but the large epidemics aren't as common as they were in our parents' and grandparents' time. Having said that, I think the world needs to understand, in Australia particularly, that there's a new infectious disease which develops or evolves probably every 6 months. The most effective way to prevent infections is without doubt vaccination. Millions of lives every year are saved because of vaccines that have been developed in the last 50 years. I mean, having said that, there are other ways which we all must be aware of to prevent infections, and it depends on the infectious organism. Some things are spread sexually, some things are spread by mosquitoes, some things are spread by the germs around us in the environment, coughing and sneezing. So I think we have to understand how common things are spread, but overall, vaccination is the most effective way to prevent infections. I started with my malaria research. When I was a medical student, I was very interested in immunology and tropical medicine. And it was natural for those two to come together. So having studied malaria research and immunology in America, I then came back to Australia in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and became aware really of the first time of how serious streptococcal diseases were within the Australian population, particularly amongst Indigenous Australians, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And then looking at the organism that causes rheumatic heart disease, rheumatic fever, which is so-called a group A streptococcus, at the molecular level, we could see a lot of similarities with the malaria parasite. So I thought, well, having studied malaria somewhat intensively, and at the molecular level, we could see similarities with this organism, and we thought we might be able to take some lessons from malaria and apply them to strep. So that's how we got into strep. Malaria is a pathogen in many respects like the HIV virus, and it's like streptococcus and pneumococcus, which causes pneumonia. It's an organism where no two organisms of the malaria parasite are the same. So if you had malaria and I had malaria, and you looked at those parasites under the microscope, they would look exactly the same. Once you drill down to the molecular level, they are totally different organisms. And that's why it's so hard to develop vaccines against things like malaria, HIV, streptococcus, pneumococcus, and a few other things, is because you're not developing vaccines against one strain, you're trying to develop vaccines which will cover thousands, if not millions of strains in the case of malaria, with one vaccine. The research processes have evolved a lot, actually. I mean, when you're younger, you've got an experiment or a project to work on, and you try and solve one thing at a time, essentially. But then as you get more into your research, you have to multi-skill. You have to bring other people around you. You have to involve other people with different skills to you in research. I remember when I was a young student, I mean, collaboration wasn't thought of in fond terms. But today, we understand it's essential. So our research team involves people of multiple skills. We have biochemists, we have chemists, we have immunologists, we have vaccinologists, we have clinical people, we have statisticians, we have regulatory agents, regulatory specialists, and we need them all. And business managers, secretarial help, we need them all to actually do something in terms of vaccine development if we're going to make vaccines for complex organisms like the malaria parasite, like streptococcus. One of the things I take great sort of pride in is that medical research in this lab, and I think in many labs throughout Australia, involves a research team from people around the world. More than half of my lab were born overseas, about 2/3 of them were born overseas, and probably half of them only are Australian citizens. And I think that's just a wonderful thing, because we know that research is an international event. And we have to collaborate with people, not just in our own lab, in our own country, but internationally, to bring the best people in. So the people we've got, they're all bright. They're all very bright, and they're all passionate about what they do. We have people here who are not students or postdocs, but have a degree in science, but want to work as part of a team. Ultimate goal is clearly to develop vaccines for these two major conditions, streptococcus and the malaria parasite, but also not just develop them, but to develop them products that are affordable and can be used not just in the wealthiest countries in the world, tourists and so on who might be going to these malarious areas, but to people who who have limited means. So they have to be affordable and effective against multiple strains.